Hey everybody, this is the Red Viking back with another video of the Redcat Gen 9 International Harvester Scout 800A SR-2. Okay, so here it is, Redcat Racing Gen 9 International Harvester Scout 800A. This was a vehicle that was produced from 1968 to 1970. And if you wonder why I gave you the eyebrow for the SR-2, it's because the SR-2 was a model that was actually a promotional model that came in fire red and in this mustard brown. There was less than 2,000 of them made. And that vehicle in particular was a white top, and there was about 1,500 made in red, or a white top, and then they were like a golden mustard color. So in our decal sheet here, in our bag where we get all of our goodies that we'll talk about in just a moment, there is a sticker that says SR2 on it. And I see it on their box, and I did my homework, and it turns out that the SR2 was, there it is right there. It turns out that that was actually a special edition that they did because they were discontinuing this body style, and then they were going to go over into the new Scout body. So what is an 800A? So between 1968 and 1970, the 800A was a dollop edition of the 800 Scout. And so the way you could tell was the front of it had black bezels. It was a three-piece design. So it had black bezels on both of the headlights and then where the front radiator cover is. And that's how you would know that you were looking at an 800A. In addition, inside the car, and I'm going to get a picture of this for you, on the dashboard, there was an emblem and it would say 800A. And that A was carried over from the Aristocrat edition, which was supposed to be the high-end edition on the car. So that's basically what we have here. Now, looking at this car at the Gen 9, you may think that this thing is larger than your Gen 8 that you love so much, and you would never in a million years buy a Gen 9 because you're such a Gen 8 fan. But I'm going to show you a couple things about the Gen 9 that may make you change your mind. There are a couple issues with the car. I will admit that right off the bat. The first of which being, if you can keep the mirrors on this vehicle intact while you're running it, you are a superhuman. Otherwise, the car is great. Although I will say, having just bench tested it, it feels to me like the micro servo that changes this two-speed transmission that we have in here is a little bit weak, because I've had a slight issues right on the table, and that's before even taking it out and running it. So I am gonna say that you may want to do that kind of upgrade. But let's talk about the differences between what you're getting in a Gen 9 and what you get in a Gen 8, because there's only a $60 price tag difference. Okay, so the first thing you probably saw when I was messing around with the body is that the body is not Velcroed on like the Gen 8 was. The Velcro is gone, and now we have these hoops that are in the back. I'll get you a better picture of that. And these little tabs. And all you got to do is turn those tabs, and the body stays on the car. It's a three-piece body if you don't include the little seats and steering wheel and things like that. You have the outside panel, you have the interior, and you have the cage. Now, when they put this thing together, it's not as tight as a Gen 8X. So there is a little seam right here on the hood that you may want to actually caulk so you don't get extra water coming up into the car. That's one of the things to consider about it, but the interior on this thing is absolutely awesome. You know, we have our steering wheel, we have all 3 pedals, we have the gas, brake, clutch pedal, you have your 4-wheel drive high and low, and then of course it is a stick shift. The dash is set to be lit with the Redcat light kit, which you can purchase separately. The link is below for Redcat Racing. You just got to click on that if you want to pick this car up. And this is the light kit you'd want. They call it the 16 LED light kit. And it takes lights in the dash. However, because I don't see them back here having buckets, I believe you have to remove this piece, and then that's where they would go. Otherwise, you'd have to put holes there. But they say right on the box that that's what it is ready for. Okay, so I think that's about it. Oh, and the other thing was the international badge. So that's how you knew. Right on the inside, there's a badge there that would show. I'm going to get a better picture. Pointing to it really isn't going to do anything for you. But you got your back seat here, your front seats, and amongst your decals, you actually have the leather interior that would go on the inside of the doors, floor mats, speakers, gas caps, all different kinds of things, your little zombie response team things, everything else like that, plus the Redcat decals for Gen 9 and striping and everything else like that. So they give you more stickers than you could possibly put on the car. And somehow, I'm in Texas, right? The Texas sticker is almost the same size as the New Jersey sticker, even though New Jersey fits inside of Texas 33 times. But I guess I can't imagine that they would want a giant Texas badge on the top of their Redcat Gen 9. I don't blame them. It's a beautiful truck. So one of the surprising things to me for the truck was this. It may surprise some of you Gen 8 owners too, who have said that you're steering away from this vehicle because you're such a diehard Gen 8 guy. I get it. I have a Gen 8 that's barely Gen 8 anymore. That's why I didn't bring it out, and I brought one that was stock so I could show you what you're getting ready to run out of the box. The first thing is this, is that these bodies on the Gen 8 and the Gen 8 Axe were put on with Velcro, okay? The Velcro was extremely hard to move on and off. Most guys lost this in favor of magnets or running a different body or using a body pin system. There are posts inside the bag, so you can most certainly go ahead and put a different body on here. And I believe you have about, don't quote me on this, but you have about 20 millimeters of play for your tires. So depending on the body, you can run this thing comp 1 with just a tire change and this body, or you can swap out your body, and then as long as you center those tires, you're still good with comp 1, especially with that new landscaping thing that they're doing, if you're going to try to compete with the vehicle. A couple reasons I think it's more of a trail vehicle than it's going to be a comp vehicle, but there are going to be people that are going to take it and put, you know, a ton of money into it and make it a comp vehicle. So I should mention that it is comp 1 compliant except for tires. But there are a few interesting things about that. So we're going to, about the makeup of this vehicle, we're going to get into in a minute that are very curious. Okay, so yeah, to show you, here is our Gen 8 Axe body, and it is in fact longer with the hump on the back and comes out more in the front. In addition, it is wider as well. Try to get that centered. You're able to take a look there. The fender wells bring this body and they actually make it larger. So overall, the Gen 8 is a larger vehicle than the Gen 9. One of the aspects of this car, we're going to take the top off now so we could talk about, and I mentioned the light buckets, right? So you got light buckets in the back and light buckets in the front so that you can run the headlights on that. Okay, so one of the things about this car is that it's a 2-speed transmission. So for $60 more than what you pay for a Gen 8 getting into a Gen 9, you get a 2-speed transmission on the vehicle. And that 2-speed transmission literally is 50%. It's a high and a low. Your low is about 10 miles per hour. Your high is about 20 miles per hour. Give you an idea how fast that is. The Losi 22S and the Traxxas Corvette and Toyota Supra, they run at about 24 miles per hour. And why they would make it that way, it's because they've redesigned the portal axles. So these are different portal axles than you get in the Redcat Gen 8 or the Gen 8 Axe. And in addition, you are going to be able to, in the future, as more and more products come out for the Gen 9, be able to do more reduction, because while your pinion and spur are 32 pitch, technically 0.8, everything else is mod 1. So if you know how to do gear reduction, you'll be able to work on this vehicle and reduce the gear, and you're going to have a tremendous amount of power, because this is a 17-turn motor with, and I had to write this down, it's a 550 can, by the way. It's an 11-tooth pinion with a 45-tooth spur, to give you an idea of what you're working with. So you definitely have room to experiment with your pinion and spur gear on this transmission. The transmission is a divorced transmission, so it's very easy to work on. You would just have to disconnect the dog bone style link that goes into the transmission to be able to do a motor swap or to do a pin and spur swap on the vehicle. Really easy. The battery tray is centrally located. There are some battery trays that you can get for the Gen 8 that put the battery a little bit forward. I'm not sure if you're going to want to go that route, considering you can't really do much as far as the sides go with eliminating much of this distance. You can certainly take, if you're not going to compete and you're just going to run it in trails and you want to have great articulation on it and great flex, you can take these wheel wells off. That's not an issue. However, on the side, because the servo for the transmission is mounted right here, you would not be able to take this piece off, or you would have to make something so that that servo would be reversed and upside down and sitting where the battery tray sits, or you'd have to Dremel out the battery tray. That'd be a lot of work. So I'm not really even sure you'd want to go in that direction. Where my battery is placed now, you should know this, I have a shorty battery that's sitting inside this truck. And one of the issues that you can run into with the battery is, if, like on this battery, which happens to be a CNHL, if your battery posts come up too high, they can actually press on the interior right there on the body. And so the actual positioning for a shorty battery is actually better if it's in the back. However, that would require me moving the front piece of Velcro one position. And for the sake of this video, I wanted you to see it the way that it comes. And so this is the way the vehicle is going to look. It is a Dean's plug or T plug. They did not go with XT60. That's a simple swap that you could do. That's pretty common to see Deans on everything Redcat. The portal axles, I said, were redesigned, but the center metal diff cover, which they give you, is the same as the Gen 8. So you could start with your brass there. Treal is already making, Treal, link will be below, is already making 16 different parts for this, aluminum shock towers and things, but the most important part are the brass pieces that you can put up front. Because when you have a 10 mile per hour crawler in low and 20 mile per hour in high, you're going to get some torque twist in the vehicle. The other thing is, when we actually turn the wheels on this vehicle, when it's under pressure, the wheels will turn into those inner fenders. I've heard a couple people say that you should run lower shocks on this. I happen to disagree with that, because we're already hitting the inside of the fenders, so I don't think we should be going and lowering the shocks unless you did decide to do the tire swap. If you're running it on the trails and you're running it with great, a great set of tires, you're not worried about comp, that's not a big deal. If you're going into comp, then, I mean, you're going to be changing a ton of this stuff out. So everything I'm saying is going to make a difference to you. As long as you keep the body looking the way it is and the only thing that's visible is that servo, then you're going to be swapping, you're going to swap out that micro servo immediately. You'll be swapping out the motor and going brushless. You'll be swapping out the Hexfly ESC. They give you a Hexfly ESC over here that's rated 2 or 3S. On 3S, the highest I saw it traveling was about 24 miles per hour in someone else's video. That's like Wraith spawn speeds, which, by the way, was discontinued by Axial. I was very sad about that. The Wraith and the Wraith spawn have been discontinued. So I'm definitely sad about that. It was sad to see the STX 10.2s go. We'll see what happens with these new STX 10.3s that Axial is doing. So 2-speed transmission is worth the $60 right there. I could stop there and I could say, look, you have a more scale, 1/10 scale trail truck that's really quick. It's TRX4 or faster than some of those TRX4s run, of course, without locking differentials. But there's more to it in this design than that. And I have to show you this because this is something that plagued Gen 8 users. And so I've seen a lot of guys going, no, I love my Gen 8. I'm sticking with the Gen 8, this and that, and everything else like that. I want to show you now why you might want to consider going with the Gen 9 as either your first trail truck or your first comp truck or your first truck that you experiment with for $399 versus the $360. I think I'm going to make it really obvious really quick. Here we go. Okay, so this is the Gen 8 Axe Edition. One of the first problems that people started having with the Gen 8 Axe was axle shift back and forth, problems with their angles for the panhard bar, and having bump steer issues and steering issues that were located because of the geometry of the car. This truck, even though it's a shelf queen, has been dialed in to try to reduce some of that from happening. I want you to take a look at how the shocks move. I want you to take a look at how the axle moves. And remember that this is the previous version. This is the Gen 8 that we're going to do now. Take a look at that. Well, so we're going to start at the drive shaft. You can see that drive shaft is moving and jerking. So if we follow that to the axle, our axle moves about a ½ inch when I steer to the, let's see, I'm going to the right. And then it comes back maybe a little less, maybe a ¼ inch when I go to the left. It's also very jerky. And when I say that, what I mean is I can feel everything from when you look at the shocks, how the shocks are moving. I can feel them jerking back and forth with the return of the servo on here. Now, this was an upgraded servo because this is the Axe Edition. You would normally be hearing the winding servo on the regular Gen 8. You can't get the Axe Editions anymore unless you're able to find one on eBay. I accidentally got one. That's a different story. But when I found out that I was not going to be able to get one again, I decided, you know what, I'm going to shelf it because I already have a built out Gen 8. There's no sense in me, messing up a beautiful Axe Edition. So you can see basically what we have here is we have great response because of the electronics that are in here. We have a FS5 digital controller that came with. I'm sorry, it's an FSGT5 that it came with, and it was the first brushless RTR that was released. But on the old models, the panhard bar, as you can see, is located in the front, and the servo is facing forward. I'm getting that on camera. I'll bring it a little closer to you so you can see that, and we'll do the same thing. I might have knocked it out of alignment. Now you see, sometimes it'll return, sometimes it won't. Depends on where I leave it. But you can see it's got good response. It's fast. You know, that's certainly the new Gen 9 is not going to be as fast as the electronics in this hobby wing. But the amount of movement that's here means that when you drive this vehicle and you come up against a rock or something and you go to maneuver it, you are going to have an axle shift and it's going to move its left or right. So a lot of Gen 8 owners spent a lot of time trying to get that geometry correct so that they wouldn't have that movement. Okay, now for the Gen 9. Now pay attention again to your drive shaft, the axle movement, and the steering here on this vehicle. This is out of the box. This is without me tuning a thing. I haven't done anything to do this. But take a look at the axle and look at how little the movement is in that axle. And that's on a coreless digital servo that they have in there. And then they also reverse the direction of the servo. So not only does it help with your clearance, but it helped with the overall steering on the vehicle. Now, if I were to punch this and pull full right, well, the car is down in this direction, and I were with the body on, and I was to start to steer this, get this to sit properly, it's going to dig into the side of the wheel wells. So I wouldn't use this much, but I'd want that much available to me. But just to give you an example, when we move this truck, are you able to see that there? When we move this truck right and left, it's got a really nice response to the geometry that they've done on the linkage. That says a lot from where we've come from the Gen 8, that instead of us having to go out and buy aftermarket linkage to get that to stop happening, that we already have that problem that's been addressed here. I think that's really big. So again, for $60 more than you'd get a Gen 8 for, I think that's another selling point to the car. The tires that you get on this thing are Interco again, but they are Interco SS M16s. And what you would get on, and let me show you the grip that's on those tires right there. A lot of grip on the tires. You might have problems with some sand and mud because the lugs aren't very tall, but it's going to be a really great all-around purpose tire. You're not going to need to cut the lugs or anything like that. On the Gen 8, you know, I was afraid this was actually going to happen. I, honest to God, was afraid the body was going to try to reattach itself. That Velcro has always made me crazy. But the old tires were the IROCs. They were Interco IROCs. They're both on beadlock rims that are plastic. The IROCs, you can see, had thicker lugs that were on them. Side view gives you a better vantage of that. So less trouble in the sand and mud, but when it comes to climbing and the grip, this tire is going to be a little bit better, I imagine. I don't know until I've really gone out and like tried it and really, you know, spent a lot of time with it. The other thing I should say about the wheel wells is they're not on the body. To do the old body, they had to double the wheel well. So you had to have a wheel well that would have the single piece of Velcro, but then you had to have the other side of the Velcro, which meant you had to have it again here. And if you were going to use magnets because the Velcro made you nuts, then you had to remove this again. Also, there's no spot for light buckets there, and the light buckets are already set up here on the Gen 9. All right, what else do I need to tell you? So if you're not familiar with the Hexfly, or this Hexfly is like the hobby wing, what is it, 10LB60? I don't know why I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but basically you have a jumper that's on there. See if I can get close enough for you to show you here. Right here, you're gonna have a jumper for your drag brake and for your LiPo. And so if you look on the side, it'll tell you the percentage of drag brake is going to be 0, 50, or 100%. You just move that jumper to the correct position, and you have to move it to NIM or LiPo. They come set up for NIM, I suppose, because mine came set up for NIM, and I just had to move it over to put it in the LiPo position so I could run a LiPo battery. I'm running a 2S battery on here, and it's just fine. You're more than welcome to experiment with whatever kind of batteries you're going to use. It does not come with tow hooks on the side of it. So on the original Gen 8 original edition and the Axe edition, they came with plastic tow hooks. I just happen to have all kinds of crawler stuff all over the place, so I got a red set of tow hooks I'm going to throw on there that I think look nice with the blue. All right, so you have an all-wheel drive sticker that's on the truck. That's probably going to irk some people because when they see all-wheel drive, they think of something like an Audi Quattro or something like that. But the truth of the matter is an all-wheel drive system is any system that has four-wheel drive that's on constantly, meaning it's always providing power to all four wheels. Back in the day, a four-wheel drive vehicle meant that it was constantly engaged in four-wheel drive. Eventually, we got to the point where we would have them in rear-wheel drive, and then we would gauge locking hubs by getting out of the vehicle, and we would lock them, and then we would have four-wheel drive. Now we can do it with the push of a button or a lever, depending on what you have. Like my Dodge Ram, it's a button, and if I want it in you hit four-wheel drive auto, and it basically decides whether or not you're needing four-wheel drive for the traction. Otherwise, you can put it in four high or you can put it in four low, like this vehicle works. So because you can't put this in two-wheel drive, it is an all-wheel drive car. There was, I guess it was probably back in the early 90s when that all-wheel drive thing transfer from the wheels that slip to the wheels that grip became a thing. And because of how advanced we've gotten with our transmissions, we think all-wheel drive is something different than four-wheel drive. Technically, these vehicles are all-wheel drive because you can't take them out of their four-wheel drive mode unless you have something like the VS4 10 Phoenix set up that way. I know their new ready to run that just came out. You're absolutely able to do that and run it in two-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive. And the same is true for the Moab Bully. You can set that up so that you're just running front-wheel drive or just running rear-wheel drive because it has two independent ESCs. In this case, it's okay that they have the all-wheel drive sticker on there. It doesn't have to have some big 4x4 sticker that you see on the side of a truck because most of the time they're running in two-wheel drive anyway. However, the reason I'm mentioning any of this is because they fixed the steering. But at the same time, because the steering is fixed and we think we have these great angles that we're now going to be able to achieve, what happens is the rear tires are pushing on the front tires, and the front tires radius is going to be based on the gears that are inside the differential. And the gears inside this differential are pretty tall. And so what's happening is on this vehicle, if I turn the car full right, and I start to give it a little gas, hope that stayed on camera, the rear is pushing and that front doesn't want to obey. It does not want to comply. So if I turn it and I push on here, and we got some grip from this mat, you can see it jerking. Same thing happens if I go to the left. Here, I'm gonna pull it back again. Go to the left. So what it's doing, it's jerking a little bit. And so the best way to handle that is to go for the overdrive that you can get from Trio. So I've heard that inside the diff, and I haven't experienced this yet because I thought I'd have my Trio products before I actually did the video on here. But I've heard that it's kind of tight inside here as far as the overdrive goes for the Trio that they made for the Gen 9. And I haven't tried to swap out for any of the aftermarkets that they made for the Gen 8. It's a Mod 1 spool, so I imagine you could find a spherical spool that would fit in here nicely. But so far what I've heard is there's a little rubbing, there might be a little generation of heat, or you may have to shim it. You may even have to Dremel it out a little bit if you decide to change the overdrive. But if you overdrive the front on this, the amount of steering increase that you're going to get is quite significant. So it's something that I'm going to recommend to anybody who's serious about crawling and wants to think about what they're going to need to do with their Gen 9. I would say you're going to need a new micro servo for your transmission, because when it shifts, it does have, sometimes it'll have a slight delay or a little bit of an issue moving back and forth. And then I would say that you're going to want to go for the overdrive. And then after that, brass, because you're already at an 8 to 9 pound vehicle. So then you add the battery to that and any of the accessories that you'd want to put on there. The vehicle's going to be heavy anyway. And let me just show you, this is one of the things I want to show you, the speed on this vehicle. So without taking it out and just running it here, this is on 2S, and this is the low gear. And then with the press of a button, you see here, it lights up blue. This is the high gear. This is a crawler. But the idea there is that because you can change all the gears out and everything else like that, you can make this however you want to make it. And they gave you the power to do that. Sometimes, like I found myself when I had a crawler like an SEX 10, I don't remember if it was 27 tooth or it was a 32. I'm sorry, a 27 turn or a 32 turn motor. I felt like I wasn't getting enough turns out of the motor. I felt like I needed more because I wasn't happy with my spur and pinion options with the motor that turns slower. And so then that brought me over to going into brushless. But I happen to be a brushed fan. I like brushed motors. They're easy, they're cheap, they're simple to replace, and they're some of them are really easy to rebuild. It's just, I don't know, it's just the way I am. I mean, you can go and buy a $150 motor and it may be terrific, and then you might hate it, and then you spend $150, or you could buy one for like a brushed from Home's Hobby, you know, and put it in here, and you might absolutely fall in love with it, with one of his what is it, the Torque Master series or the Sport series. But you know, it would depend on how many turns you want. In any case, it gives you a lot of room. Let me show you the transmission. One of the things that I had heard one of the people mention in the forums is that this little battery stay actually can interfere with the servo. Here you can see it, it's right over the servo. So they said that they actually got theirs caught, and so it wasn't able, the micro servo wasn't able to move to shift it in and out of gears. So I see that, so I'm just keeping it up so it stays up out of the way. I'll try to hold it back. Well, let's see, if I just pull it back this way and tuck it here, you'll be able to see the servo work for our shifting of gears. Now, here's an interesting thing. I want to show you, because the truck is smart. So here's what winds up happening, is if the car is in high gear and you go and you power the car down while it's already in the high gear and you turn it off, and then you turn off the controller and it's still in the high gear, the servo goes to reset itself. So when I go and I turn on my controller, and then I go and turn on the car, it resets the servo. So I'm back into low gear. Did it get stuck? And there you go. So look, you guys got to see it on camera. The issue that people are having with the micro servo, that sometimes the servo isn't strong enough. So you could see just during the power down and power up that I did, it had that issue. So the way I'm going to correct that issue is I'm going to turn this thing off, and I'm going to give the vehicle a chance to move that servo, again, that micro servo. I heard it. Let's see what happens. There we go. That's great that I caught that on camera, because just saying it is one thing, but being able to show it to you that on the bench it happens, you know what's happening out there in the field. So as far as the micro servo goes, that's one of the upgrades you're going to want to be looking at. So there's a bunch of companies that make great micro servos, Reefs, of course, being one of them. I think Shifts makes one. You have to take a look and see who is making the best and most affordable micro servo to make that shift change. Here's your controller. It's pretty standard as far as your steering rates go and your dual rates, but then you're going to see in the bottom corner that there's a set of dip switches. Those dip switches there are assigned to your 2-speed transmission and to your lights. So when you put the lights in, you are supposedly able to be able to swap the dip switch so that you're able to engage the lights as being always on or always off. I'm not sure of that though, because in the manual, the way I read it, that wasn't very clear. So I'm going to find out after I install it. The aluminum shock bodies, if you take a look at the way I have mine now, they were literally run all the way up. You should know, anytime you buy an RC car, most of the time the shock towers, okay? Take a look at your shocks, look at the shock towers, look at the collar on the shocks. Most of the time they are run all the way up. Why? It's the easiest way to put them on. It's the easiest way to make the vehicle small so it can fit side packaging. When you buy a basher and it's compressed and it has that zip tie around it, if you take a look at the shocks, the collars are all the way up. So before you go and you do your drop test, and you know, when you snap that zip tie off, you got to make sure that you run the collars down so you're giving some suspension to the vehicle. So these I haven't done much adjusting with because I haven't taken it out for its spin, because I want to show it to you in a decent condition before I wind up destroying and beating it up a little bit. But as far as the shocks go, I do not know what shock oil is inside them, although I will tell you this, it feels extremely light. And the second thing is, because they're not adjusted, we're going to see what we can do as far as torque twist with the tension on there. Really happy with the steering, really happy with the wheelbase, really like the tires, really like the 2-speed transmission. I keep facing it towards me because I like it so much, but we got to fix that micro servo issue that's on there. Don't know where I'll wind up positioning the shocks in the end, or whether I'll even wind up keeping these shocks, because I happen to be a fan of a few different company shocks. I don't know which one I'm going to run on here, so I'm not going to mention now, but it could be Desert Lizards, it could be Prolines, not really certain. I do run Prolines on some of my rigs because they're just so easy to adjust on my crawler rigs. I love the fact that it's such a high turn motor and spur pinion combination, because instead of, well, let me show you. Okay, this is the Axe edition, but this is going to be the same as your Gen 8 on your brushless. These rock sliders that stick out on here, which most people remove, have been replaced here with these really sleek looking rock sliders, and the body sits right inside the channel that's on there, and it sits really nice. They can be taken off as well if you don't want to use those. The body, of course, can be cut underneath if you're the kind of person that wanted to remove the wheel wells. Another thing I wanted to show you is how far they had to put that bumper out to get it to work with the body. So these both bumpers are down on the ground right here. So you can see how much further the tire is and how much further the bumper is put up. If we push that bumper all the way down, we can't adjust the front one anymore, but if we push that bumper all the way down, we would still be longer in our Gen 8. But take a look at the drive shaft difference here. The Gen 8 versus the Gen 9. Just look at how much tighter that is on there. Pretty neat comparison. It's, you know, they say the devil's in the details, and I think that's true here. So, without further ado, so that is your Gen 9 from Redcat Racing. International Harvester Scout 800A, not SR2. I like it. I like it a lot. I showed you some of the great things about it. I showed you some of the things that need a little bit of improving. I think all crawlers are like that, where it's like, okay, this is great, but you know, this could use some work. I think this is one that's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's really a trail truck. I don't think it's going to be doing much climbing. I definitely don't think you're going to be turning this thing into a belly dragger. I think a lot of Gen 8 guys are going to convert and find that they like the Gen 9 better. I think there are other guys that are Gen 8 that are like SCX 10.2 guys. They're going to be like, nope, my Gen 8 is my Gen 8. That's where I'm going. I don't want to hear the words Gen 9. And that's fine too. We are going to do some Kyosho in the future. We're going to talk about the Mini Z product and why the first Mini Z is one you should avoid at all costs, and why the other ready set, which still say first Mini Zs on them, are absolutely awesome. Rear-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive. Then we are going to do some drift cars. We're going to do the Yokomo Pandem GT Supra. I'm sorry, GR Supra. And then we're going to do the RDS drift car from Redcat that just came out. It's got a lot of carbon fiber on it, and it was made in tandem with Tandem RC. And then we're going to do King Sling. We got a bunch of things that are coming up. So let's run this truck and see how it does outside. This has been the Red Viking. Thank you so much for listening to me wax poetically about the Redcat Gen 9. I hope I see you out there.
I'm trying both. I'm trying to do it while it's rolling, and then when it's not rolling to see if that makes a difference in this transmission. It's gonna take some time for me to figure that out. I did buy a new micro servo already, an Ego Power from the guys at Hobby Shop Leander. Big shout out to Chris.